Good evening, everyone. We are so excited to be here tonight on the Black Intellectualism Movement. As you all know, I've been very excited about this week. I have been talking with you guys about a lot of things. You've been messaging me and contacting me about some news I've shared about a documentary called The Cotton Pickin Truth. So I'm thankful that you all have shared in the excitement and that you've been so supportive in sharing the news about tonight's interview. I'm not going to waste any time because we have two extremely busy men in with us tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and get right into business. I'm so honored to have the producers from the Cotton Pickin Truth here with us tonight to talk about the documentary and for us to get some insight on what kind of things we need to take going forward. How can we continue to elevate Black culture and share meaningful stories? First, I want to state that what's really been so amazing about this experience to me is that Mr. Tim and Mr. Tobias are actually father and son. And I've just been so excited and feeling energized to see the father son duo produce such an amazing and meaningful documentary for us. So, first, I'm going to introduce Mr. Timothy Smith. He is a former Fox News producer, a graduate of Columbia College in Chicago, producer of the Cotton Pickin Truth, and he was raised between Chicago and Alabama. And I found that to be very unique because he brings us both the perspective of the North and the South. So that's going to be very interesting today. We also have with us Mr. Tobias Smith, who is a filmmaker, audio engineer, musician, songwriter, and media specialist. He is, excuse me, and songwriter. He is the owner of Detroit Media Specialists. He is a graduate of Wayne State University, and he is also one of the producers of the Cotton Pickin Truth. And he is a Grammy nominated producer on the Donda album by Kanye West. So everybody's going to be really excited about that because we have a lot of Kanye West lovers, of course. And I saw in particular that you did the work on the Hurricane song. So my best friend was over the top because she said that that is her favorite song from the album, and the album itself is absolutely a masterpiece. So you have no idea how honored I felt to have both of you all here today, and I appreciate that you made time to come with us. So let me kind of share a little bit very quickly about how we got to this point. Most people already know that I'm really into talking about Black culture, Black heritage from the time I was in high school until I've gotten here as an adult, even as a high school teacher. My passion has been ensuring that we share our story in order to continue to uplift humanity and our people. I came across the Cotton Pickin Truth on Amazon Prime, and I first shared the documentary a few months ago because that's what I enjoy doing on TikTok is sharing resources and sharing stories. Well, we had a story come out a few weeks ago about slavery still going on in Georgia, and finding out that there was actually a ring of enslavement going on, and people were being paid approximately 20 cents an hour, or something like that. I decided to share that story and then bring back to conversation the documentary of the Cotton Pickin Truth. And this time it really took off much faster than I anticipated. To date, we have a little bit over 100,000 views on those videos, several questions, several statements. A lot of people said they went to check it out and were definitely impacted by the work that you all did. I think what was so interesting for me is that I live here in Monroe, Louisiana. And so Vicksburg is roughly an hour from me. And so the communities you're talking about are literally a hop and skip away, skip away. There are places I've passed through when we go out of town. There are communities that are if they're not directly familiar to me, I've at least heard of them, but never really knew the history behind them. So we want to thank you all for doing such meaningful and important work and talking about a part of history that people really don't know about that is also still connected to what's going on today. So I'm going to get right into the questions. And as I stated before, this is very free flow. Please feel free to share whatever you want to share. And if I don't ask what you want to share, please feel free to guide the conversation in that direction. So, my first question is, how did you even discover the story about Miss Mae Louise Miller, who was really the star of the documentary, I guess?
Which one of us you want?
So I guess we'll throw Mr. Tim and then we can go to Tobias.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, having us. We really full of gratitude for having us. Um, the way we came about it, I used to produce a nationally syndicated radio talk show on Radio One, and actually Tobias heard Mae. Mae was a guest on the show, and Tobias heard it, and I was actually prepping for the next week's show and stuff. So I wasn't really paying too much attention to it, and Tobias was like, "Daddy, Daddy, that's it, that's it." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "That's the documentary. That's the documentary that we've been talking about doing for the longest." And I was like, "Okay, cool." I said, and he was like, "We're gonna do that documentary." And I was like, "Okay." The weird thing about it, I was I was like wanted to prove that it wasn't true, you know, but that turned out to be different. But so that's kind of on my end of what we how we discovered it. Even though I booked her on the show and everything, it was like okay,
He didn't
but to
believe it to be what it was. And I called her after the show and had a long conversation with her and committed to doing the documentary the same day. And we started probably filming like we went down to Louisiana and filmed her interview maybe 2 or 3 months later.
So I guess one of my questions that kind of ties into that was like, how did you feel, Tobias, when you talked to her? Did you automatically feel that, this is true and this is real, or were you leery as well?
No, I wasn't leery at all because it was so detailed. You know what I mean? Like the story was so detailed. It was no way for a person to make up a story like that. You know what I mean? Like she had too many consistent details that was like, okay, this that makes sense. People, things we don't think about. Like, no, we didn't have no forks. We had to eat straight through the head to eat the
Yeah,
bird. You know what I mean? Like, it was just too much of that, and you just wouldn't think like that if you hadn't been in that situation for real.
and
I think
everything
that was
she
one of the Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
mm, and everything she said, like the barn. She showed us the barn, but she talked about it before we even knew about the barn. We didn't know about the barn until we
Right,
went down there.
right,
And then she said, "Okay, well, I'm gonna take y'all to the barn," and everything that she had said previously, it was in the barn. And I'm
yeah.
like, "Wait a minute, this is for real," you know? Um, it was just, it was mind-boggling. And just I'm just gonna say one thing about Tobias too. He's the executive producer of it because Tobias was, he was in high school then, right?
No,
Yeah.
no, I wasn't in high school.
No, college was the college you were,
College,
college, yeah,
just
college,
graduated.
and his
Amazing.
little hip hop career was like taking off, and so he used all of his money that he had made to get it started,
It's amazing.
you
It's
know.
amazing. It's
So
amazing. I think two things. Number one, what you say about how descriptive she was. I think that was the first thing that emotionally compelled me because I was imagining when I could see everything she was talking about in my head. It really evoked a lot of strong emotion. So hearing you all talk about that, I completely understand. Another thing is when you say that Tobias actually used his personal money and you're transitioning into this little, this different industry that is, what we consider to be like the high fashion mainstream type thing, but you see this really important need for this cultural work. I think that speaks volumes of number one, the foundation that you have, and number two, the passion that drives you forward, which is that regardless of which pathway you take, right, it's about ensuring that the stories of us are told. So I think that's amazing to hear. So my second question, and I guess I'll start with Mr. Tim again, and then I'll come to Tobias. Did you have any? So we hear a lot of things about Mississippi, and we've heard things about Louisiana as well, where I live. And when you start digging in some of these dangerous places, the types of things that can happen. Did you all have any scary experiences while you were filming this story?
You want to go first on that, Tobias? I got
It's
some
only
stuff to.
one. I could. It's only really one. I mean, you know, we had death threats and stuff that came after, but like,
Wow.
I guess the one when we was on the plantation and the plantation owners drove up
In
and
what?
looked.
What did they drive?
That's what it was. The owners drove up and they kind of looked, you know what I mean, out of their pickup trucks from a distance,
Oh my gosh.
and then they sped off real fast, and we was like, oh yeah, yeah, it's time to go. It's probably time to go now. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause we had the cameras out. Yeah, it was like, yeah, it's probably time to go. 'Cause we didn't really know where we was at. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? We just knew we was far back, way out where we ain't never been before, and yeah, that was probably the scariest moment.
And
For me.
it's really not funny, even though we're laughing at it. And the thing about it is, so I said, Tobias, don't stop until we get to some civilization. The civilization wasn't until Jackson, Mississippi.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hmm. And the other thing about it is, this is the same area where Emmett Till was murdered.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
I don't know if you knew this, Tobias, but so they're coming out with an Emmett Till film.
No,
Mhm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Yep.
they're coming out with an Emmett
Yep.
Till film now.
Yep.
Nice.
Thank
So
goodness. I
Mayor
hope it's.
Mayor Glendora got anything to do with that?
I don't know yet.
So check this out. Actually, the guy who, because I'm trying to connect with him as well, who is working on this film, I think he is actually from Louisiana. So one of me and my friends who actually is affiliated with him have been digging up that conversation. He's been trying to get this film going for a while. And I did look up the mayor of Glendora. He is still the mayor. I don't know if he has anything to do with it, but I did find the Emmett Till Center in that area. So I don't know how much of a role they'll have in it, but I tell you what, symbolically speaking, realizing that Glendora, Money, Mississippi, you guys even named Marks, Mississippi, it's just kind of like this weird darkness that hovers over this area. And it's just, I haven't really been able to put that into words yet. I picked up my pen multiple times to try to like write a new poem about it, but I just have not been able to figure out that sense of darkness that's hanging. So I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Timothy, because yeah, it's awesome that it's happening, but it's just it's still so eerie when you think about everything that goes on and what you all experience firsthand. Um, so that's very interesting. So speaking of you went right into the next question. Glendora, Marks, that back road near Vicksburg, and even Money, Mississippi. As you interviewed the city, some of those citizens out there, and you talked about it a little bit, especially you, Tobias. You talked about how some of the people seem so fearful, and they wouldn't talk to you on camera. They were willing to talk off camera. But what are some of the feelings that you had, Tobias, about the citizens as you're talking about these people? Is it compassion, empathy, or do you kind of look at them like, why wouldn't you remove yourself from this situation? What were you thinking and feeling?
I mean, I felt that the people we met and interviewed were a reflection of me. So I felt respect, compassion. I felt love for them. But my grandmother on my mother's mother is from that exact same area. So if my mother's mother had not left,
That's
Yazoo
good.
County,
That's good.
that I was looking at myself. You
That's
see what I'm saying?
good.
So it was it was a reflection of me. I felt respect, passion, and love for
One of the messages I shared recently was that so often we look down on people who are still in a place where we haven't been or where we've come from. And we all evolve at a different rate. Some of us are fortunate to be the generation who make it out. And for some of us, it's going to be the generation that comes behind us. But we should always have a sense of compassion for people. And so hearing you say that you looked at them and realized that could be you, that's some really important insight that a lot of people need to understand, because even in the comments when I shared the post, there were tons of people in the comments who were saying, well, why wouldn't you just leave? And why were they down there? But then there were several people in the comments who were saying, I have family members who went through the same thing in North Carolina, in Mississippi as well. And somebody who also said like Maryland in the 70s,
Yeah.
they had a family member who was
Yeah.
enslaved. So it's very true what you say, like it could be any of us. Um, Mr. Timothy, did you have anything to add on to that?
Just that it's not only Mississippi, like you were saying. We had evidence, and people were talking to us about, well, y'all gonna do another documentary on the South Carolina, what's going on in Georgia, which just came out about Georgia. Different states and everything. The thing about it is, this was out of our pockets, and we wasn't able to fund it anymore. So we wasn't able to do a lot of more of what we wanted to do, which is good. I mean, it's okay, but it's all over. Like I'm in Detroit right now. Michigan has so many. The northern part of Michigan, I believe there's a prison up there, and they're like, well, if you want to leave, go ahead and leave. Just go ahead and leave.
No
Because
gates, because you won't survive.
you won't survive.
That's it. That's it. That's what it comes
But
down to. Yeah.
but I think in every major city, it's the same as that plantation. I mean, it's people in Chicago for
Mhm.
sure that never left
Yeah.
the south side of Chicago. They ain't even been
Yeah.
downtown or
Yeah,
outside of the city. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's the same. What's the difference?
yeah. Some of
When I
my
was in the
cousins
oh,
on
go
the
ahead.
south side of
Word,
Chicago, some of
word.
my first cousins, they're like, we had moved on the Gold Coast, and they were like, if they came to see us, it's like they were coming,
Going out of town.
going to LA to see
Yeah.
us. They just didn't do that. It's like, what's wrong with y'all?
The
So,
place where I live is relatively, Monroe is like 50,000 people. And I'll never forget, I took my students, we have several high schools here, and I took my students, I was working at a predominantly black school, high risk, impoverished. And we went across the interstate to the Chinese buffet. And most of my students had never been to a buffet. They didn't even know exactly what to order. And so what you say is very true. Like I had to kind of tell them about different food options. And so what you say about people not having a chance to be exposed is really, it's very true. And if you get there, if you don't have guidance, if you don't have support, what's next? I think what we saw in the documentary as well was what would have happened to Mae Louise had she left and not accidentally run into somebody else who actually turned out to be on a different plantation? Suppose that woman had been very, mean and sent her back. She would have for sure been killed. So by chance, they ended up getting free because they had a relative who came looking for them. But there are so many people who don't have people who come looking for them. They don't know where to go. They don't know what resources are available. So we talk about the psychological aspect as well, but sometimes if the physical resources aren't there, or if it's too tied up in government, which is a big part that you all talked about, where do you go if you leave? So that's very insightful.
yep.
So I have another question. The next question that I asked was about the 13th Amendment.
Well, let me back up
So,
one. Can I back up 1 minute on that?
okay.
Because it's one thing. So people be asking, okay, so why didn't they leave? So one part was like the physical thing that you just said. The other part is the conditioning, the brainwashing. So as a television producer, you want to know what my number one duty as a producer was? That it took me some years before I really got what I was doing. It was brainwashing the masses. And my degree is in mass communication, mass. So a lot of people got to understand that every day you being brainwashed into what to wear, what kind of jeans to buy, what
Wow.
kind of shoes to get. It's
Wow.
constantly been put in your head. And I get it. I mean, and I used to do it. Um, so I just want people to know that it's very important that they got to realize that when they ask, why didn't they leave? Well, because they were conditioned, because they were brainwashed. It was like we asked one of them, what was it, Tobias, when we asked one? if you would leave.
If
What
you
did
could
she say?
leave, if we
She
got
said
you
we
some
well.
housing.
She said that if everybody was able to leave all together, because I mean, you know, she feared the unknown. I think we
Mm-hmm,
everybody is paralyzed when they fear the unknown.
mm-hmm,
That's
mm-hmm.
I mean, people won't chase their dreams because they fear the unknown. So
Facts.
they didn't do anything that wasn't tied to everybody on that plantation because that's
Yeah,
all. That was all the people they knew. That's the family they knew,
yeah,
etc. So if everybody couldn't leave, nobody would leave.
yeah, yeah. And in a sense, I know that that seems kind of ironic, but that's one of the most beautiful forms of unity we've probably seen in a long time, where it's like an all or none type mindset. Because sometimes we don't see that in today's society, So it's almost like a bittersweetness to that. The situation is unfortunate, but the fact that their mindset is, "I'll leave if everybody can leave," is something we don't always see now. A lot of people are for themselves. Um, so I wanted to come back to you, Mr. Timothy, when you brought up working in production. At the time that you started this documentary, I think you were still with Fox, or maybe
I was,
transitioning.
I
How did
was,
you feel? Were you still there
no,
when you
I was with Radio One then. I was producing a nationally syndicated. It was a radio
radio one?
program, so I had left the television. I had left the
So
television. Had recently left the television. I wouldn't
so
have been
you
able
never.
to do both because the radio show with technology, we were in Mississippi and I was still producing the radio show. And that,
Ah,
so
so
yeah, I could do that wherever I had my phone or laptop. So
I
it
love
didn't.
that. Well, my question is then, when we talk about, because you and I have talked about this, just being a lot of the challenges you faced when you were in certain places, when you reflected back on past careers you had, and you looked at the work you were doing on this meaningful film, um, did you have any kind of conflicted feelings, or feelings of regret, or a feeling of liberation that you were moving forward to a place where you were doing work that meant something more to you?
Oh, feeling of liberation because everybody has to learn. My motto is if we stop learning, it's time to leave this planet or leave this universe. So just feeling of liberation because I had to learn things. You know, sometimes a kid can see a lot of things. I remember my little son and stuff. He said, "Daddy, you work for the government." I'm about to get. We might get cut off, but he would be always saying, "Daddy, you work for the government. You work for the government." I'm like, "No, I don't. I work for NBC, man. I don't work for the government. Tobias, stop. I don't work for." Like, no, you work for the government. Well, before I left Fox producer, I'm like, wait a minute. I did work for the government, by brainwashing people. And when it finally hit me, I started going to work physically sick to the point to where uh, I forget the doctor's name, but he said if I continue to work there, I die. I
Amazing,
mean,
amazing. And transitioning from that place to a place of doing a project like this, and you said give you a feeling of liberation. That's awesome. So Tobias, I'm going to give this question to you, because I remember seeing this post on your page. In 2013, Mississippi finally ratified the 13th Amendment. And that was actually after your documentary.
Hmm.
I pulled up a couple of articles about it, and one of the articles I read identified the 13th Amendment issue as being a technicality, even though it came down to the fact that Mississippi did not send in the paperwork because they said they did not get compensated for their freed slaves. I want to ask you, do you think that this was really an oversight, a technicality, or do you think that it was deliberate based on what you experienced, and why do you feel that way?
Like it's 100% deliberate because we're talking about the prison industrial complex. We're talking about free labor. Who why would you pay when you could receive labor for free? And this is America we're talking about. Everything is
Exactly.
deliberate. Everything is
Exactly.
deliberate.
And I
Everything
think
here is deliberate.
that's why I found that article so interesting. Like the headline literally, made it was like technicality. And throughout the article, they used the word technicality over and over again. And I felt that once again, we go back to what Mr. Timothy talks about with the brainwashing technique, right? So in a sense, it can continue to make us remain docile about stuff like this. I think about the Langston Hughes poem, right? And it can continue to make us, just kind of let this slide. But that was something that was really big. And when I think about your documentary, it's basically the reason that they could still enslave these people. And if needed, go to the courts and say, oh, well, we never ratified the 13th Amendment, so it's still legal here.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's just mind blowing. It's mind blowing. I don't think
Because the state law in Mississippi allows prisoners to be put on farms.
that's the other part. That's
It allows
amazing.
prisoners to be put on farms. So I think it was 100% deliberate. I mean, if we was talking about another race, there wouldn't be a technicality.
And there'll be an apology and probably some type of compensation. And
100%.
and we haven't heard any type of apology. And of course not for anything that black people have gone through this country, but certainly not even for that in 2013 when we were supposed to be making such progress in race relations. So, I think that every time I go back, because I watched the documentary again today, it's like my seventh time watching it, and I always find something new. But as I was watching today, I was like, it's just such a big story that speaks volumes about the layers of issues that still exist in this country regarding just one document and how they just continue to pass over it and pass over us as if it's not relevant or as if it's small. So I'm going to stay away for a minute. Do you feel that the way that this country has handled the black community is part of the reason that so many black Americans are still struggling to find a sense of identity? Because we've talked about the connection to heritage, but my other question is it also because the country just does not put us in a position to have the resources we need to get the value we deserve and to get the respect that we deserve?
Yeah, I think so. We got to recognize that it's a system in place. Okay, like an alarm system, for example. When you set your alarm system at home, it's to keep people out. Right? Somebody try to get in, the alarms go off, police get called automatically. Right? All these different things happen because it's a whole system put in place to keep the intruder out. It's the same thing. It's a system. You see what I'm saying? That's in place. Now, you can crack the code of the system, but that takes unification on a mass level. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take us to be unified. You know what I mean? But
Yes.
it's so many
All right, good.
elements to this system that got to be broken down and reconstructed that it's really not even our duty, if you want to
Yeah.
be real. We didn't put the system in place. You see what I'm
Exactly.
saying? So it's really it's really their duty to deconstruct it and do
Yeah.
it properly, but we can't rely on them. They need to do it with our
Yes.
guidance. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It needs to be
Yes.
done with our guidance. But I'm not with black people continuously struggling. Like
Hmm.
I hate the phrase like the struggle is real. I hate that phrase because it's as real as you make
Yeah.
it. You know what I'm saying? And people like to like people who say, well, "I'm a fighter" when they campaign to get your vote. We don't need to fight. We need to win.
Yeah.
And the only way to win is if we unify. Listen to Dick Gregory's instructions at the end of the film.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. 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 I think that they have adopted the terminology of the constant fight to us so that they can kind of keep us in a place of what is really complacency. And it's almost like we've had a pause because what you said is, I don't need to fight anymore. I need the victory. And that's really big because I do feel like we haven't quite gotten there yet. And not because
Because
we haven't put in
you
the
get
work
addicted
yet.
to the fight. You get addicted to the fight and the struggle.
Yeah,
Like your
yeah,
body physically get addicted to the actual struggle.
yeah.
My father
That's
taught me
it.
karate as a kid. He didn't teach me to fight for a long period of time with karate. He taught
Yeah,
me to use it if I needed to use it. It was really last resort. But it wasn't about throwing a bunch of punches. It was about throwing death blows.
yeah. You look, you have our educators stepping in the room with their comments because and one of it was my good friend Jessica. I was just talking about we taught together, but talking about how we went into the education system with the mission of making sure that we're providing learning opportunities for our kids. But the conflict we ran into was whether we were in a black school, predominantly white school, a biracial school, the stories of black citizens were always minimized. There was always some kind of way, and I know I was addressed constantly. I was always getting addressed a little bit about some of the content I was teaching. The only thing that kind of gave me a pass was that, my students performed so well, they tended to at least find a middle of the road component with me. But I hated that I felt trapped in having to meet in the middle of the road on things that should have been non negotiable. And so, what you talk about, and you get addicted to that because I stayed there all of those years accepting that middle of the road option, right? Instead of like you said, when I should have been going for the win. And it took me a minute to realize, like, sis, trying to do the right and speaking for the people outside of here, while trying to be middle of the road inside the classroom, is causing you conflicts because you're not really getting the results you want to see. You're not really able to use your voice to empower the way that you like. So what you say is so true, and the teachers over here just going ballistic because they can definitely relate to what you're saying. Um, okay, so can you take this question, and then we have I think three more. Can you discuss the restructuring of the history curriculum going on right now? So they're talking about what I call critical race theory. I want you to get started on that. So what is your attitude about basically people wanting to manipulate how we bring history into school, especially in light of the work that you do, Mr. Timothy, Tobias, whichever you would like to answer.
I got to be politically correct, so I better
All right, well, I'll say this.
I better
uh,
live.
I'll say
I
it like
talk my
this.
noise, so don't you don't have to
Um,
do it for me because I
Education starts at home. That's all I can
I
say.
agree.
It
Absolutely.
starts at home. So
Absolutely.
your kid is being taught in school is wrong. The school is just all the way wrong. Period. The whole structure of education is backwards.
Absolutely.
The teacher shouldn't even be teaching the class. The kids should be teaching. Like
Absolutely.
the entire structure is backwards in
Yes.
school. So it's
Yes.
anything they learn in school needs to almost, I ain't gonna say it should be just thrown out, but it's got to be adjusted once they come
Mm-hmm.
home. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? That's
Mm-hmm.
really the responsibility of the parent and the responsibility
Absolutely.
of the community too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have a question on that too.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're a teacher. So my question is, so are they still teaching that Columbus discovered America?
Well, I've been gone now for almost 3 years, and so and I educate my son independently, like Tobias talked about. My son actually does his own performance. So, in regards to what I teach my son, I don't teach my son that Columbus discovered America. But as far as what I've heard is in the curriculum, as far as I know, it depends on really where you go to school. There are some
It is.
districts who teach call it Indigenous Peoples Day, and there are some school districts that are still saying Columbus Day. When I checked the calendar this year for the district nearest me, they were still saying Columbus Day. So that's a reflection of the curriculum to me. I would say here in Louisiana, one of the conflicts we're having right now, I just read one of the articles last week about where they're standing with the textbook adoption this year, and they're debating exactly how they want to roll out the curriculum because they want to ensure that it's as accurate as possible, but that it is not encouraging people to feel a certain type of way. And I'll leave it at
Now,
that.
there's another thing that says like Native Americans that this was about Native Americans, but guess what? it was more than just Native Americans. We were already here, like straight up black people. We were here too already.
Well,
Before,
black people and Native Americans are the same. That's what they want
well,
to keep us divided because if they if they say black people and Native Americans are the same, then what do they have to do? They got to
you're
give us
right.
the land
Yep,
the
like
same way they did.
Eskimos.
So that's that other part of that is yeah, black people were here. Black people are Native. We the same thing. It's no
Same
different.
thing. Yep. I mean, you can go to Siberia and stuff and catch a corner, and there I am.
Well, if you take me, see, I started talking. I see, then I go all the way back to like
She
Pangea,
missed that,
and the fact
Tobias.
that before, before we were all split apart from Africa, there was Pangea, and you had people that existed then. Then I started diving into how they want us to believe that the Middle East is separate from Africa, and we get to a whole different place. So I'm just gonna say I completely agree, and I understand where you're coming from. Um, and so this is my question: as we are gaining more knowledge as people, what do you think is going to be the real key? And I hear you talk about unifying, but leadership wise, for the new generation, what is it that really has to happen for them to like get it, and for us, the middle generation, to get it, and for our older generation to get it, and for us to come together on one accord?
I think they all got to be leaders. See, when you just got one or two leaders, and you can just so that whole mentality of even leadership. Who's leading non-blacks? Who's the Asian leader? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You go to other races, there's no leader like that. They all got to be leaders,
So leadership, strong
and they got to
leadership. I like
move in unity, like as leaders, because all of them are leaders. You know what I mean? That whole idea of us having to look to some one person as a leader, that's a terrible idea. It's backwards
I like
thinking.
that.
And the leaders
So,
that we
in a
did
sense, you're
have, they
saying
killed
personal
them.
accountability as well, right? So, what I'm doing each day should involve how I'm fulfilling my leadership responsibility. Is that right,
Yep.
Yeah,
Starts at home.
Mr. Timothy? Were you
yeah,
about to say
definitely.
something?
Yeah, definitely starts at home. I was just listening to y'all though. It just makes me proud and gives me a lot of. At one point, a couple of years back, didn't have any hope, but I have hope now because I mean and yeah, it takes more than one leader, and but we still need to unify. We need to stop stabbing each other in the back. Looking at $1 bill and Neil Bell and the comments. Yeah, we see y'all and y'all are on point, but and Miss Potts, y'all are on point, but you we got to stop stabbing each other in the back. We got to educate each other. We got to listen to each other. Um, I don't know if we got here yet, but one thing, and I'm probably going to be quiet after this, but we got to realize who we are. Who we are. We are some pretty special people. We're,
Mm-hmm.
we're, we're beyond people. I mean, just think about we're brought over here in slave ships, packed on top of each other like sardines. They're having to throw some of us overboard alive. They're throwing some of us died because of the conditions in the slave
Absolutely.
ships. But yet, as a
Mm-hmm.
whole, we made it over here. So we have to realize who we are, because they said, okay, you can't speak your language no more. You know, we ever thought about why? Because there's power in that language. That means we can talk to, in other words, we don't die. And we got to get away from that mentality, that whole train of thought of, oh, they're going to kill us. It was one thing that was very important when we, well, when Tobias actually decided we were going to do the documentary. I talked to him. I was like, Tobias, they're going to try to kill us. And more likely, they're going to come at you first so that so that I can see your dad, and that what would try to stop it. And I was like, so what do you want me to do, Tobias? And what talk to Tobias? Tell him what happened,
I
and and
mean,
and what the decision you told me to do at that point.
I mean, I told I told you that we got to do it because it was ordained for us to do it. And plus, I don't
Yes.
believe in death. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? I believe that energy just transfers,
Mm-hmm.
The
and
science does.
And that's the truth. It
so
does transfer.
yeah. I mean, if we all energy, and we know that energy doesn't die,
Transfers
it
from
just
person to
moves into new dimensions, or energy just moves. So I don't really truly believe in death, so I don't have a fear of it.
I like that. I
And a
like
lot,
that.
and the rest of us, we gotta get beyond. That's where we gotta be. We
Yeah,
can't
fear.
be afraid to die. You know, we we're not gonna unify, and we're not gonna get ahead until we get that frame of mind.
Right.
Everybody else get reparations and stuff, and we haven't got any reparations. Why? Because we haven't unified. But we spend the most money in the entire world to this
Right.
very day.
We also haven't been strategic at all when we talk about um, reparations. That's not our fight. I think about it like this: if you're gonna go into a bank and get a business loan, if you want to walk into a bank with somebody who has an economics degree from Harvard and has
Mm-hmm.
has has talked about doing loans, never got a loan, but they dress well and they look like they can get a loan, or do you want to walk into the bank with the CEO's friend who he golfs with every day to get that loan? You want to go in with the friend, right? The friend can
Yeah.
co-sign you with the CEO and say, hey, here's the loan, and that's it.
Yeah.
The other guy can talk himself to death. You know what I'm saying? Give all the bullet points. We've been fighting reparations for 100 and how many years? 100 over 150 years now.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
not our fight. You know what I'm saying? We're not gonna get it. They got to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what was it
We can
said, Fred?
guide them on that, but it's not our fight.
Well,
That's
what did they say? Frederick Douglass. They wouldn't let Frederick Douglass be part of the abolitionist
look.
movement.
That's exactly what I was talking about. I was about to say. It reminds me of the part where they talked about Frederick Douglass and the abolitionist movement and the white men having to fight and the
Yep.
power of allies. I hate to say it, but the major movements that have been successful have not been when we as Black folks have worked by ourselves. We have had to have other people who don't look like us with us because, in a sense, they do feel obligated then, and that's unfortunate because we are just as valuable and just as deserving, but that's the way this country has been set up.
System. Yep. We're falling right into it.
And
You
you
know.
said something a minute ago about what like how we are so valuable, Mr. Timothy. And I wrote this down earlier today on my little pink card, and I had written, "Black people are God's gift to humanity. We must make room for us to receive healing and recover from the trauma of the Black experience through slavery and the Jim Crow era, so that more of us can give life and live in the fullness that we deserve to live in." So, when you said that statement, I was like, I was just thinking about that today. We have been a healing element for so many other people. We have carried the weight of this country. We have made this world because it's not just about here in the US. I've been studying about racism that goes on, and I think we forget that. And I talked to you about that, Mr. T. I'm like, when we were put on those ships from the coast of Africa, we have family members that actually ended up all over this world. And so, if you think about every place that Black people, like, we're the only group that were like picked up and transported to all these different places all over the world, but we've managed to bloom no matter where we go, even if we've had to create our own. And so, I think that there's a lot of healing that has to happen for us because of so many of the burdens we carry, because of what our people have been through, in order for us to fully operate. in this life the way that we deserve to. And I think that that would also help us move into that healing phase and understanding our true role as leaders, Tobias. I think that some of us have, like, we get it, we've been able to receive it. And so the job we have now is to continue to help others get it. And that's definitely what the Cotton Pickin Truth does. Absolutely, is you give people something that they need to know, because we need to know what's still going on right now. We need to understand that there are systems that are still at work. But if this woman, if Miss Mae Louise could sit down and talk through this story, I was crying. I had to get myself together. I'm like, how is she telling this story and she's not breaking down? And I could hear, little tremors in her voice. But if she can get from that point to this point, then it's an indication that we can do the same. But I think that there's a lot of healing that needs to continue to happen to Black people as a total culture, and as a total group of humanity, in order for us to really just live fully and freely, and experience what liberation really is. If that makes sense. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah. You know, May is probably one of the. She's probably one of the most intelligent people I ever met. Honestly, I mean, she's she's there. She is there. She's
Yeah,
man.
it's hard to put into words who she was. For me, it was, I don't even know what to say about her. She was super intelligent, super spiritual, very loving, very aware of everything that was happening. I mean, she was amazing.
She
Strong,
was.
mentally,
Well, we know that.
physically.
And
I
when she
bet you
said
we.
at the end she wasn't angry, I was just like, like, it's really a charge to us as individuals to live life differently. Seriously.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you just she really she was an amazing woman, and I'm thankful that she left that here for us. I'm thankful for all of the people who actually participated, even those who were afraid to show their faces. I'm thankful that they were bold enough to still say somebody needs to know what's going on, because I think sometimes we fall asleep, or we think we have really gotten places, and we need to understand that even if you've gotten somewhere, there are people that still need you to bring them along, that still need you to reach back and help them. And I think we definitely needed to see that. Okay, so I have just two more questions. I'm not going to keep y'all forever, because this has been a really amazing conversation, and I know you all are busy. So my next question is: the work that you have done is meaningful, trailblazing, and influential. What is the best advice? And you kind of said this a little bit, but I was thinking in terms of you all being father and son, and even being connected back to your family, still having that close relationship with your family that's in the South. So, what is the best advice that you can offer for creating a legacy and continuing social justice advocacy? And I'm gonna start with Tobias, and then I'm gonna go to Mr. Timothy, since you're the dad.
um, I think it's a million different things that you can do, different um, plights to get involved in. It depends on where your heart is. I think first you got to check your heart. Like my dad said, how we had a discussion before we started working on that film about what could some of the possible outcomes be. So that's the first thing, is to check your heart, and decide what you wanna, what you willing to sacrifice in order to be an advocate, because you're gonna face some definite adversity anytime that you're fighting for the truth.
I like
So
that.
that's my that's my that's my advice.
I like that. I like that. You're gonna definitely face adversity when you're fighting for the truth. I see a lot of people give up, and I think that if people know and understand that ahead of time, then you kind of know what to expect. That's awesome. Mr. Timothy, wisdom you have for us?
I think I would leave that alone. Leave that where it stands. That was pretty, that's pretty much well said. You
You
know,
know?
we, yeah, we were right there.
Yeah. I'll say that as a mom, I have a 7-year old, and one of the things that I'm working on, I always believe that my thing for him was like whatever he wanted to do, he could do it. I never wanted to try to influence him to do what I love doing. I've been writing and speaking since I was a high school student, and it's something I chose to do just because I loved it. It was my escapism. I lived in the projects and I was going through a lot of challenges, and that worked for me. But when my son was traveling with me, he saw it, he liked it, he wanted to do it too. And so when we talk about legacy building, I think also that just living it day to day, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but just getting up each day with the mission to live in the fullness of your life and to find your purpose and to live that out is the greatest way that you create their legacy. And whatever your children find an interest in, supporting them in
Yeah,
whatever direction they go in, so that they can continue to be trailblazers and that they know what leadership looks like. So, what you say is so important about that. And I think that we have to understand that, when we talk about building legacies a lot, people get so hooked on thinking that it has to do with materialism and being able to pass down money and wealth. And all of that sounds good. But if you don't give your kids the skills that they need to maintain those things and to increase those things and to share those things with others who need to know them as well, then you're doing a disservice, right? And you run the risk of your legacy ending very quickly. So, you guys say some really great things. So, I have one other question to ask. And if there's anything else you want to share, you can definitely share it. What projects do you have, and what future projects can we expect from you? We'll start with Mr. Timothy, and then we'll go to Tobias.
um, well, we want to do more major films and stuff like that, and really can't talk about, what we're gonna do and everything. Um, oh man, but it was something I
I
did
could
want
talk
to
about
add.
one.
Okay, well, hold that for 1 second. I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna add this. So the way I was brought up, go to school, go to college, get that degree, and go and work for somebody. But the way I brought up Tobias was go to school, get an education, learn stuff, and work for yourself. So it's like we need to stop telling our kids to go and work for that oppressor because that's what you're doing. You're working against yourself. I'm done. What was your point, Tobias? It was different.
Um, so one of the projects I'm working on with Rhyme Fest is his project. It's,
Let
it's
everybody
a
know that if they don't know Ryan Fest, I mean they should, but say
Rhyme
who.
Fest. Is one of the dopest rappers from Chicago ever. He's a writer for Kanye West. He wrote like Jesus Walks. He worked on the
Okay,
Donda album. That's where I met him.
okay.
And the project, I can't talk about it too much, but it's going to be coming out very shortly in 2022, and it's going to involve Nikki Giovanni and a conversation that was had between Nikki Giovanni and James Baldwin.
Oh
Mm.
Crazy,
my God.
crazy.
Let me tell you something. My friends, they're gonna be going ballistic in the comments. Nikki Giovanni is my favorite. Anytime she is down by Louisiana, I go see her. And if you're talking
Yeah,
about the interview, I think when she was young, I think she was around 25 that she had with James.
yeah. She heard the project.
Yeah,
Yeah, she blessed it too. She said that she was with it. So it's,
she's amazing.
whoo, boy, when y'all hear this
I
and
cannot
see the
wait.
visuals,
Oh
it's
my
gonna be
gosh. Let me tell you
spectacular.
something. She is phenomenal. Do you hear me? And
Mm.
she is so one of her she has a statement that changed my life because I go on YouTube and I watch all of her interviews and things like that. And then I try to catch her when she's not far away. But I remember that she made the statement about parenting, and it wasn't because I wasn't a parent then, but it was about the fact that parents are doing the best they can. She was like, nobody wakes up with the mission of failing your child. And so I remember when I would go to the classroom and I would go work with these kids to do poetry workshops and things like that. Um, it took me out of the mindset of trying to judge why the kids are in the situation they're in and focusing on what I could do in my short time to help them become better. And that changed everything about how I was handling any encounter I had when I was working with other people. She is so powerful. So I'm excited. That's gonna be that's gonna be really, really awesome. Really awesome. So we're gonna keep tabs on that. I'm sorry, but go ahead. Anything else? Awesome.
I can't talk about some of the other things.
Okay,
I won't.
okay. We'll be staying in the mix and just following. And so the other thing is that on January 31st, correct? That's when the Grammys will air. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So we want to encourage everybody to tune in so that we can cheer for the Donda album and Tobias's work. And we want to thank both of you for stopping by tonight. I know you all have a lot on your schedule. I am so honored to have interviewed you this year. And just to explain a little bit, the Black intellectualism movement is relatively new. In January, I started hosting a series of conversations where I wanted to continue to uplift Black voices and talk about intellectualism that goes past just what we see on TV, but really digs into meaningful conversations with Black professionals and Black people who are talented and have gifts to share with the world. From there, people have really encouraged us to keep moving forward with these topics. So I talk about anything that people would like to hear. So I appreciate Mr. Tim and
Tobias.
Tobias for deeming me worthy enough to have this conversation. The platform has moved a lot quicker than I anticipated, but I'm really, really thankful because it's amazing how they say you can put in 7 or 8 years of work and then you have that 1 year where things totally transform. So having you here is very meaningful to me. It's very meaningful to the people who are watching, and it is definitely encouragement to keep moving forward with sharing these meaningful messages. I wish you both the best. I thank you so much for joining us tonight. Is there anything else that you wanted to share?
I'm just so
Yeah.
grateful to be here.
Appreciate you.
Yeah. You know,
No problem. I
believe it or
appreciate you.
you just don't know how important you are about some of the things I can't talk about. Cause
Well, thank you.
you fit right in with some of the things I can't talk about.
Well, okay,
So
well, we'll have to continue conversing then.
yeah,
Well, I
please
look forward to
please
continuing
have us
conversation.
back or one of us back or
I would
something.
absolutely love to, definitely. So I'll hopefully be keeping in touch with you all. And if I
Yeah.
can be of any service, please let me know. I thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I wish you the best, and I'll be in touch.
All right, and
Same to
thank you,
you.
Miss Young.
Appreciate you.
Thanks you, Miss Young, for the shout out. I see you. We see you.
Good
Salute.
night.
All
Okay.
right. Peace.